struggling to move your nonprofit forward? You've come to the right place. Welcome to the Nonprofit Architect, where we are giving you the actionable steps you need to launch and grow your nonprofit organization. Now, here's your host, Travis Johnson.
Hey, Travis Johnson here today with Jared Ledbetter. Jared, how are you doing today?
What's up, man? It's another beautiful day in the neighborhood.
I feel like we just recorded one of these yesterday.
That's because we did.
Oh, yeah. I was on your show yesterday. Today you're on my show.
Yeah, man.
If you're listening to this show, you can find us everywhere. We're on everything from iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, Podknife, Caster, everything under the sun, including iHeartRadio, except for Pandora. I'm still waiting on Pandora, but you can find the show anywhere else. Just search Nonprofit Architect Podcast, and you'll find my beautiful voice. But Jared does web design, SEO, business type stuff. Jared, why don't you tell us about Carbondigital US?
Yeah, man. So Carbondigital, that's my digital agency, if you will. So I started out doing web development and just specializing in web development. And eventually, throughout most of my career thus far, I've actually hated marketing, despised it. I hated it so much I failed my college class on marketing. Like, marketing, stay away. So one day, though, it all kind of just clicked that everything that I've been doing has all been marketing. And it was a huge, huge realization. And once I figured that out, it's like everything that I had ever done that was tied to marketing started flooding me. And so I was like, oh, crap. Been doing this wrong for a bit now. Let's go fix that. So I went back and started reviewing all the stuff that I'd done. I started learning online about all the different tactics that I've utilized and stuff like that. And so I've kind of grown through SEO and social media and just marketing in general to kind of get where I'm at now. So the short version of what I do is I identify problems and provide solutions. All of that tends to result in long-term growth. So that's my primary focus, is to build a better foundation. And so once that foundation is there, it's solid and it's ready to rock, and then it's slingshot you out into the world through like advertising and stuff and really tackle the market. So
yeah, through all your years of building digital products and websites and getting into SEO and finally realizing that's all marketing, you've learned things like how to build a website, and not to just build one, but to build one for a purpose. So when you're thinking in nonprofit terms, it's not just a digital pamphlet. Your website's not just a digital. This is just information about us, right? Your website should have a purpose. But before all that gets started, what should you do before you build your website?
Well, before you even talk about a website, you got to figure out who you are, right? It's got to be, what we're talking about now is branding. Your branding has to be rock solid. Because if your branding is not rock solid, nothing else is going to work. And there's a big reason for that. Travis, you and I have talked about the story brand framework. We talked about what that structure looks like and how to apply it and stuff like that. And so for anyone who doesn't know what story brand is, it's a framework to present your brand or your business, your nonprofit, through a story. And that story is the same type of story that's told over and over again everywhere throughout all time. And it's quite simple, really. You have the person who you're trying to work with is your target audience, right? They have a problem. You help them solve that problem, which either ends in their success or failure. It really is that simple. And a lot of people make a mistake in that storyline because they place themselves as the hero in the story. But you can't be the hero because you're not the one going to the website to look and see what happens. You're not the one looking at that ad on Facebook to click on it. It's somebody else. So that other person is telling the story from their perspective, and you have to be the guide that puts them on the path and gives them the choice to take action or not action, so then that they can succeed for themselves. So in Star Wars terms, you are Yoda, not Luke.
So in the nonprofit world, right, you would be the guide as the nonprofit, right? You have the programs, the knowledge, the impact, but as the nonprofit executive director or as the nonprofit team, you are the Yoda guiding the donor to the solution, right? So you're building this up and you need the donor to donate, to bring their money in, to put capital behind what you're trying to do.
Yes.
The donor is the hero of the story.
Yes. So we're both veterans, so let's talk about a veteran nonprofit for a moment, right? A lot of veteran nonprofits make the mistake of marketing to the veteran to donate for the nonprofit, right? If you look at the numbers, veterans are 1% of the population. They're the people you help, not the people you take money from. Go look at the other 99% of America to get their money. And that's a huge mistake that people make all the time, is they're not targeting the right people. And so, this story brand framework helps you establish that, because you really got to dig deep. You got to take a hard look at it and figure out what's what.
Yeah, absolutely. In veteran terms, and I think I've brought this up in a few episodes. They're the ones hurting. They're the ones in need of support. But so often as an executive director or founder of a veteran style nonprofit, all your branding and everything you do is based on your time in the military.
Right.
Love Denny Katona from OP Veteran. His shirts are primarily OD green. That is fantastic if you were selling shirts to veterans. It is not as stylish if you're selling that same OD green to the civilian population.
Right.
They don't understand the meaning behind it. It's not really that fashionable. It doesn't really connect with them as a donor, as a supporter, the same way it would as it connects to a veteran.
Exactly. So
definitely,
realistically, you could take those pastel colored shirts, slap your design on that, and do significantly better, because you're seeking out donors, not the people you're supporting.
Yeah. What this might sound like in another style of nonprofit, like if you're feeding homeless people, that would just be like you are marketing to homeless people to try to support your cause.
Homeless. Yeah, it doesn't work.
That doesn't work, right? Think of like a feral cat rescue. They'd be like marketing to the kittens in the alley when they obviously can't support you. They're the ones in need of the help. So you must understand that you have at least 3 different audiences. You have the target that you're trying to provide services to. You have in your organization the people that are providing services, and then you have the donor group that you're trying to market to get them on board with the story. So as a nonprofit, you are really selling your services as the Yoda, as the guide, as the wise person that has access to help the donor through the process of delivering these services. You're not the hero yourself. And I think a lot of people get hung up on that. I know there's a lot of like solo shops out there that kind of suffer from this martyr syndrome, where they think they have to do everything themselves, and if they're not the one carrying that torch forward, then it's not going to get done.
Right. And the beautiful thing about StoryBrand is you can take every one of your audiences and apply the StoryBrand to it. So we were just talking about the donor side of things. You could also take that same framework and apply it to the people you're supporting.
Okay, so what might that look like if we're talking a veteran nonprofit?
Let's say that your charity supports veterans dealing with PTSD, and you get them into outing excursions, horseback riding, camping, whitewater rafting, survival type training, that type of stuff, right? So if you're catering to if you're looking to StoryBrand to your audience of the veterans in need, then you actually don't target them. You target their family members, because the people with the problem the people who have the problem are not the ones who are going to see that they have a problem. That's the hardest thing in the world, is for a person to come to terms with reality that they have a problem. Your chances of actually getting them into a program exponentially increase when you target their spouse, their siblings, even their children in some cases. So you would focus on people who have a family member with PTSD, and then you would show all of the benefits that you would go through one of those options. So let's say, well, whitewater rafting, right? So you would say, okay, the sister, or let's say the wife of a PTSD veteran has the problem of, he's starting to look inward instead of outward, needs to get him out of the house to do something fun, bring him back to life, so to speak, right? So the guide, this nonprofit, shows up and says, hey, we have this trip, it's all paid for, it's other veterans, you don't have to do anything, just sign up, we'll take care of it all. What's that wife going to do? She's probably not even going to ask him. She's probably going to register that day and be like, hey, you're going. Right? She'll pull out the wife hand and say, hey, you're going. Yeah. You need to do this. That's the type of thing that you want to look into. And that's why you need to know who your audience is, because your audience doesn't have to be the people you're serving.
I like that. So we kind of skimmed over the branding before the website. You said you have to know who you are before you can build a website. So let's keep on the same lines with the veteran nonprofit that provides outdoor excursions. In this case, we talked about whitewater rafting. So what might the branding process look like for that type of nonprofit?
So the actual story brand framework, I freaking love it. I can't believe I'm upset that I didn't create it. That's how awesome it is. Right. So you can actually take this framework and leverage it against every action that you take. Right. So you need a logo. You need to have a brand message. You need to have your audience identified. You need to have your colors, whatever colors you have for your company. What's your company going to stand for? All of that type of stuff is wrapped into branding. And so once you figure out this story brand framework and how it applies to your company or your organization, you push that against everything. Everything now has to fit within the mold of this framework. And if it doesn't, then you discard it. That's the beauty of this, of the framework, because when you're writing your message, and you can't just say, come join us on an all expense paid trip to Mississippi River to do whitewater rafting. Like, that doesn't do anything, because you have to leverage the actual framework to apply that to your branding. You apply that to your the other branding elements. You apply that to the website itself. You apply that to your social media advertising. You apply that to everything. And when you apply that to everything, you achieve something that most people never get, and it's called consistency. When you achieve consistency, the probability of you obtaining more success is exponential. But it also has to be like a good service, a good product, a good experience, that has to be good as well. But that, coupled with consistency, is what is the largest driving force in an organization's success.
Yeah, consistency is definitely good. So listeners, you're listening out there talking, we're talking about story branding, and it's mystorybrand.com, and we're not advocating for them specifically, but there is a very interesting script that allows you to apply every aspect of what it is that you do to a story. And we all know that facts tell and stories sell, and having the right story behind your brand really makes the biggest impact. Think about that time you went to a fundraiser where things were disorganized. You heard people go up and speak on stage, and they shared their story maybe, but you can tell that it definitely wasn't rehearsed. There was definitely no framework to it. And a lot of rambling and a lot of like incoherent thought in there, just some feelings that popped up, and you can
Right.
you tell the difference between something like that. Another fundraiser that you've been to where it was a very crisp program, the speakers definitely had lined up what they were going to say, has to do with their transformation process from how they were before the nonprofit helped them, the how they helped them, what the actual program was, and how they are now. And you see the result as one of these stories. So I brought up on my screen here the Story Brand script, and it's real straightforward. I'm just going to give you the highlights here on this. Use it or don't use it. I know a few companies that use this, and they use it very well. And if I mention the names, you would definitely know who they are. But you basically have a character. You have a person. You got to figure out what they want, and they encounter a problem. It's an internal, external problem. Could be philosophical. It could be a villain. And they're wanting to do something. The character wants to do something, so they meet a guide who has this authority. They've been to hell and back. They've been through the process, and they have the empathy for the main character. So the guide gives them the plan, the process, and how they're going to do it, and then gives them this call to action. It's either a direct or a transitional, but they're holding them accountable. And the character then goes through the story themselves, and they either end in success and failure. But either way, there is this internal transformation, either a realization that they've accomplished something or they've become a different person through the process. And that's the kind of framework for a story brand, something that we're talking about here.
The best part about all of that is if you actually end in failure, because there was structure, you can go back and figure out why you failed. Even better.
Even better. Right. So you go, Travis, I listened to the podcast with Jared, and I went through the story branding, and we went through and we built a website that doesn't convert. And I know Jared has all these tools that help you track someone through your website. We talked about it yesterday. What's that? Was it hot?
So there's three primary ones that I utilize. The first one is the Facebook Pixel. So any traffic that goes to your website from Facebook is going to track them to your website and then track any actions that they take. So if you want to track them subscribing to a blog or donating or completing a purchase, those actions are tracked. The second one is Google Analytics, and it does the same thing as Facebook Pixel, except it doesn't just track from Facebook. So it figures out where they come from and tracks all of their actions on the website, presents it in some nice clean data so that you can understand what's happening and why. The other one is Hotjar, Hotjar, and Hotjar is basically the visual representation of the same data that Google captures. So they have some videos where you can see the mouse moving around the screen. They have another segment that shows you where people click on the page. So, for example, I had a client and we were tracking their site with Hotjar, and the people kept clicking on a title. We're like, why are they clicking on this text? And once I realized what it was, they thought the text was an actual link. So we changed that text to be a link and carried them through the next page in the process. It's something as simple as that, had a significant growth for this client. Another thing that they have that's quite well is the scroll heat map. So anytime you scroll down on your mouse or your trackpad or whatnot, this system will track how far down the page you scroll. When you're looking at this, if at any point there is a time when the numbers jump really fast, anything like greater than 10%, if they just suddenly jump, you know that there's a problem there. So you will look at, did I do something wrong with my branding? Is my message wrong? Is my copy wrong? Is the website messed up? Did it not look right on a tablet or a phone? You have to assess what that problem is and figure it out and fix it, because the point is to keep them on the website longer. If you can keep them on the website longer, your chances of getting them to subscribe or give money are significantly higher. And so this software helps you do that. But you definitely have to learn to analyze what it's telling you Like, it's not going to say, hey, there's your problem, fix this. No, it doesn't do that. You have to learn to read it. And so, but yeah, once you do learn to read it, it's a phenomenal tool.
So what I'm picturing in my head is a nonprofit site, and just for simplicity's sake, we'll say it's a one-page site. So if you click on any of the tabs, it would just jump further down the page to a section.
Okay.
So you just say these people are scrolling through, and every time they get to a video, people watch the full video, except for the third video on the page, right? There's 5, but for whatever reason, none of them play the third video. You could then infer that there's something that they don't like with probably the copy or the thumbnail
right
of that loading screen. For some reason, they're not watching that particular video. So if you were a nonprofit, you could then change that video out or remove it altogether to make sure you have the content that people are wanting to see.
Right. And it could be that that's the most important video of your message too. And maybe it's not even playing because, maybe you copy and pasted the code from YouTube and you added an extra character or something stupid like that. And so it's not actually playing, even though on your side it looks pretty. It could be something simple and stupid like that. So you got to really assess the situation and figure out what's going on.
And I know there's definitely a lot of discussion out there between website designers and website owners. And there's one of the big consternation points, as I understand it, is what looks pretty versus what converts. And pretty does not necessarily convert into clicks for any reason.
Right. I've seen some some amazing looking websites that do absolutely nothing. And I've seen some of the most disgusting looking websites do the most amazing work. And it's insane. So I've always just tried to find a happy medium. Find something that looks good, looks clean, matches the branding, but also converts. And so when you're talking about conversions and web design, what you're really talking about is the user interface and the user experience. And we don't have enough time in the day for that conversation.
Right, but as like a nonprofit, right? You have goals, right? You're looking to you want to, as far as I understand it, you want to convert people into something. You either want to convert them into someone that's on your email list. You want to convert to someone that is purchasing products from your website, which means if you're listening to this, you should have a shop where people can buy swag with your name on it. All right, they're paying you for the opportunity to market on your behalf. Go ahead and let them do that.
Yeah.
If you got questions about that, ask me, because that's one of the things that I do. Or they should be turning up as donors, and they should be clicking in that block. If your website, in my mind, isn't geared to at least one of those primarily, I think you're probably designing your website wrong. I'm getting nods from Jared on that.
Right. And so for anyone who has no idea what we're talking about, this goal-oriented mindset is how you track how well you are doing. So if like Travis said, you want someone to subscribe to your blog, that's your goal. When they actually subscribe, that is called a conversion, because they've converted into a visitor, into someone who's taking that specific action. And so when we're talking conversions, we're trying to get people to switch into just being a spectator into being an activist. Like, that's kind of the concept there. So everything that you do has to be goal driven. It's all goal oriented. And if you don't have a purpose for your site and you don't have any goals, then why do you even have one? Like,
right. It's not just a digital information pamphlet that doesn't help you.
It's just a waste of space if you have no goals, no direction, no purpose.
Right. If your goal is to, say, drive people to your page to then turn them into volunteers, then that should be one of the primary things on the first page. When that page loads, you should have the opportunity and, quote unquote, the call to action to become a volunteer. That should be big and prominent on the page.
Well, not only that, you have to look at the user flow. So when a person goes to a website, people have their own vision, their own experiences, their own way of processing information. And this is where Hotjar comes in pretty handy, because it actually tracks every move and every action that person takes. So you can actually see where they go to. So if they're clicking in your menu to go to page 2, and then they're looking and they're scrolling, they're like, oh, I see this blog post. Okay. And they go to your blog post, and then from there, they go to your contact page, and then they do nothing else and they leave the website. Well, then you've just seen that they have a blog post that was interesting to them, and you can push that blog post. Mm-hmm. But also, every bit of that had nothing to do with your goals. Right.
Right. Well, and then they went to the contact page to look for something, and they clicked off without taking action. So the thing that they were looking for and hoping was there wasn't listed on your contact page.
Right. And if they went to that blog post and then directly to the contact page, they're probably connected. But at the end of the day, you want to put the information where people are going. Right. So if they're going to a blog post and then directly to a contact page, you want to try to see how to get that contact information on that blog post, which is probably where your footer comes into place. Or maybe if you're looking at a sidebar, that might be a place to put that as well. Maybe have a big button in there that says, hey, contact us now. You know, there's a lot of different options. But you're going to have a lot of people that are just browsers. Just people that are just generally going to go to your website and do nothing, just poke around. It's going to happen. It happens all the time. But for the people that are actually there with the intent to take action, you want to make sure that process from start to finish is as many smallest number of clicks possible. Right? Think golf. Lower score is significantly better. Right. And so
I've always anything more than 3 clicks was a violation against internet protocol, right?
That's right. Anything more than 3. If you can get it down to 1, and then they're submitting, so the second one is actually submit form or complete purchase or whatever, that is ideal.
Yeah, 2 clicks. Donate button, everything's right there to fill out, and then submit. 2 clicks.
Yep, that's ideal.
That's perfect. Okay.
If you can actually take it even further, if you want to, when you run your advertising, so you can actually take them directly to the right page. So it's a 1-click process.
Oh, through an advertising funnel?
Right.
So listeners that are out there, if this is the first episode you're listening to, Jared and myself, go back to the site, look for my interview with Preston Cohn. He walks you through the Google Ad Grant, which is $10,000 a month to use for advertising, up to $10,000 a month, which is up to $120,000 a year of free marketing budget for you. He walks you through the process to get to where we are right now here in the story.
I'm jealous about that. I'll take it. I'll start up a nonprofit just to get it. Like, that's how important that is.
That's nuts. Anyone?
It's not how that works, but yeah.
No, it's not how that works, right? Anyone with a small and a startup nonprofit, which is primarily our audience here, who we're talking to, you don't have money for advertising. You just don't. So go listen to that episode with Preston Cohn. Beg, borrow, and steal money from your friends to have enough to pay a pro to run this for you, to maximize the amount of dollars you're using. And you're like, well, I don't have a product. I don't have something for them to click on. You're going to create a T-shirt for them for a 1-click upsell. They're going to a $1 support your cause now. And the next page is going to be an upsell to a T-shirt to show their support for your cause. And
you need something.
Either driving them to your website, which has a purpose, or some other facet of what your board determines that you need to keep people in your information loop, so you can continue to get their continued support.
Definitely, man. Yeah, you definitely want to make sure you have one upsell and one downsell. So that way you can start with something free, move up the ladder, come back down the ladder. It's definitely a process. And I know no one here knows what we did yesterday, but we looked at that funnelytics system, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like mapping out your funnel and the customer journey and exactly what happens when any action is taken. is a big game of tug of war. You take an action, customer takes an action. You take an action, customer takes an action.
Mm-hmm.
And that stuff has to be mapped out. And if you fail to map it out, the chances of you failing are significantly higher. That's just the reality behind it.
So they've seen your ad on Google or Facebook and they want to support, and the first click brings you to a give $1 to support your cause page. The next page could be a one-time upsell or $19 extra to get a t-shirt to show their support, and then you click off. They said, no, thank you, right? So then you would get a pop-up for a downsell, and right now we have face masks galore across the U.S. So maybe it's a face mask with their logo, or a
$5,
or a neck gaiter for $5 to continue to show your support, but at a much lower barrier of entry.
Right. The customer acquisition process for nonprofits is exactly the same as it is for for-profits. You have to get people in the door. You have to sell them a story. You have to use upsells and downsells to keep them engaged.
You got to understand that you are, as a nonprofit, you are a brand. You might not be as big as Nike yet. You might not be as recognizable as the Red Cross yet, but you are a brand. So the things that you do and say in the online space or with a donor, that stuff becomes public knowledge and public information. And if you are a hothead, they're going to assume your brand is a hothead, and they might not support you. Some people love hotheads. Some people don't. But it needs to be consistent through all the stuff you're doing. If you have a great, wonderful story that you've had someone, professional copywriter, go out and help you design, and all this looks magical, and you can maintain that on your social media, but once someone interviews you in person and your story doesn't line up with the story brand that you've created, there is an inconsistency, and that's going to drive people away.
Right. You're actually perceived as a fraud.
Yeah. They think you're a liar.
Right.
Which we don't want. No one which we don't want.
Right. So then the Supreme Court comes out, and then you're treated like Tucker back in the 40s, right? So I watched that movie the other day for the second time. It's awesome.
Which movie is that?
It's called Tucker. It's about the Tucker cars, post World War II.
I'm not familiar. I'll have to look that up.
So he created a car that had the most safety features. They had seat belts. They had headlights that turn whenever you turn the wheel, so you can see where you're going. They had pop-out windows. They had a rear engine. Like everything about the car is pure aerodynamic, phenomenal.
Yeah.
And then the big car companies of that era basically unleashed fury upon them, and they ended up having to go to court. And then they won, but they never made any more cars because of it.
No kidding.
Yeah, dude. They only made 50 in a prototype. Yeah.
That sucks.
Yeah. So, I mean, you don't want to get like a year into your nonprofit, get your first media appearance, and then have the same thing happen to you. That would be bad. And that's where that consistency and working on your branding and knowing who you are and who your customer is insanely important.
If you're listening to this and you have an idea to start a nonprofit, this is part of the prep work that you should be doing leading up to launching, unveiling, whatever kind of process you go through before actually starting your nonprofit. This is part of the process, and this can take weeks and months, hopefully not years, as part of the process to see who you are and what kind of person you are, right? Like, I'm active duty Navy. I know Jared is a Marine Corps veteran. Like, if we went off and did something far outside of our experience, people are going to understand that it's not that it's not real, but that it's not as authentic as it could or should be, right? If you are a single man and you are designing, I don't know, bassinets for babies, and you've never had a baby, you probably are outside your lane and outside of any experience that you have, unless you come from some kind of woodworking family. Stay true to who you are. Stay true to the style that you're accustomed to. Whatever the thing is, you as the brand itself, you as the beacon for your brand, must be authentic, and that branding must carry out through the things that you do. Does that make sense? Yeah.
It does, but also it's important to realize that everything that you do is a never-ending process. You're never going to stop looking and analyzing your brand to see if you need to do something more, if you need to change something. Once you have a website, you're never going to stop tinkering with it. The same thing with your social media. You always have to post something to get engagement. So that's something that you gotta realize. Once that kicks off, you're going to be working all the time. You're always going to be doing something. There's always something to do. Whether or not you actually hire out for those pieces might dictate how much free time you have. But aside from that, you just need to recognize that you always have to do something to tick the needle forward.
Right. So if we go back to our example of a nonprofit for veterans, and they're running their social media site, the vast majority of the posts are going to be you educating the public on the problem as PTSD. Some of it's going to be about what you do, and some of it's going to be a highlighting of how you've done it, or testimonials from the people that you've actually helped.
Right.
And there will be events, and some of them are going to be asks. But the majority of what you're going to be doing is educating the public on the problem.
Yep.
You run a feral cat rescue, you're going to talk about problems with cats. You're going to talk about spaying and neutering and how important that is. You're going to talk about how to maybe approach a cat that has had problems. And then on
recognizing a house cat from an Aristocat.
Yeah, perfect. House cat from Aristocat. And then maybe on Friday, you're going to have, a little blurb about what you do and maybe some kind of offer to help them in there. Right? Every post you do as a nonprofit should not be an ask. It should have a lot of things.
It's actually it's the same way with a business, with a for-profit company. 80% of what you do is not to ask for money. It should be to educate and provide value.
Yeah, like we did yesterday with our episode for your show.
Yeah, dude.
We spent a lot of time, over an hour, educating Travis on some digital back-end stuff that I'm just not familiar with.
Yeah, it's actually an hour and 50 plus 50, an hour 51, I think it was. Yeah.
Right. That was,
almost 2 hours.
That was the whole show, but definitely more than an hour was, well, let's be honest, it was like an hour 49 of the hour 52. I know where my skills are.
The first and the last minute we're covered. Everything in between
was educating. A lot of the show is talking about things that as a nonprofit founder, executive director, you might not understand yet, or you might not have been privy to, or you're might not sure that it exists, or you've heard something about it and you don't know in depth about it, or you've heard about it and you've seen it done one way, but you want to see it another way. And that's the goal, is to bring on guests like Jared that have that insight, that have those special skills that can tell you maybe something a little bit different, maybe a little bit deeper about the things that you know or you think you know. And that's really the goal of this podcast, is really that education piece. And then also, buy a t-shirt at reallydesigns.biz.
Yeah. Buy a shirt or else.
Buy a shirt or else. Well, buy a shirt or else I'm going to keep paying for this podcast out of my own pocket.
That's right.
Jared, where can the fine people get a hold of you if they want your services or your expertise?
Definitely. So my website is Carbondigital US. My social media handle for Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook is Carbondigital US, all one word. And then I also have a YouTube channel. You can just look up Carbondigital and find me there. The logo's the same across the board, so pretty hard to miss.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're a nonprofit out there and you have questions about website design, the purpose, how to build a story brand, or you just want to know more about this area that Jared just crushes with SEO, hit him up. We don't do this just for fun, although I do admit that I have a good time. We do this to get out.
I have a good time.
I had a good time. We do this to get those out there and to actually have people contact us with questions, because that's the whole point of this stuff. Jared, it's been a blast having you on the show.
Everything that I do is in the hopes that you never call me again. I try to set you up for success so well that you never have to call again, but a lot of people fail, so I get calls.
That happens. That definitely happens. Look up Jared. All of his details will be in the show notes. And if you want to get into this discussion in our online Facebook community, go to facebook.com/group/nonprofit architect. We'll see you there.
You've been listening to The Nonprofit Architect. To listen to all our past shows, visit http://nonprofitarchitect.org. And be sure to subscribe, rate, and review our show. Thank you.